Good afternoon, everyone. This is a joint hearing with House Commerce and Economic Development, House General and Housing, and House Ways and Means. We're taking this Friday, January 9th, 2026 at 1:08 in the afternoon. We're here to take testimony on the CHIP guidance from last year's session. We have with us Jess Hart-Lieben he's the Executive Director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council, and we also have Commissioner Alex Farrell from Housing and Community Development at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development to start it off. So welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I think the purpose of this hearing is more to understand, hear how the process went with creating the guidelines that Betsy has proposed, and to hear from our legislative council as well to make sure that legislative intent was followed in those guidelines, and to hear from some of the users that may be filing applications for CHIP. This is not a hearing to rehash what went through the legislature last year and what the conference committee came out and the governor signed. This is moving forward, better understand how CHIP will be working. So with that, Chair, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
You've been most eloquent.
Madam Chair.
Agreed.
Okay. So with that, we will introduce our committees, or
If you wish.
well, it's a long process.
No, I think we all know each other.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Okay.
Let's just get to it.
You got it. So we'll turn it over to Jess and Alex. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm actually really smiling because I got technology to learn, to be totally honest. So just for the record, I am Jessica Hart-Lieben. I am the Executive Director of BEPC. And I just want to thank you all for, first of all, getting together in one room so that I don't have to do this 3 separate times. It's really great to be here and to be back here 7 months later since the passage of the CHIP bill. I just want to personally thank each and every one of you again. I am so grateful for your efforts, for your dedication, and for your support to bring this much needed and very wanted opportunity to Vermont communities and municipalities in every corner of the state. We've heard from so many municipalities this summer, and I just did not want to miss the opportunity to personally thank each and every one of you for that opportunity that you have given your constituents. I'm not sure if you've seen recently that in Fairhaven, the 24-acre site that many of us visited in July for the ceremonial signing of CHIP was officially donated to the owners, or by the owners, I should say, to the town of Fairhaven. The town of Fairhaven plans to use this land as a CHIP project site. And it's really inspiring to see towns like Fairhaven bring this much needed housing to their community. And that Joe Gunter, who testified in front of many of these committees last session, is going to realize his vision of redeveloping the old racetrack that has sat vacant for many, many decades in that community. Just to give you some background, as for the launch of CHIP, CHIP is on track to launch later this month. Our staff has continued to develop and test the software platform since July. And we continue to test that software platform as I sit here and speak with you today. To give you some progress on what we've been up to since the passage of CHIP in July. This summer, the VEPC Council created a CHIP subcommittee of 5 council members, which included the following: Chair John Russell, who serves from Rutland County, Michael Keene, who serves from Bennington County, Rachel Smith, who serves in Franklin County, Senator Wendy Harrison, and Representative Abby Duke met weekly from July 2nd till October 15th to draft and create guidelines, which were then reviewed and adopted by the full VEPC Council. During these subcommittee meetings, the VEPC CHIP subcommittee allowed for public comments and stakeholder input and provided robust engagement throughout these summer and fall meetings that ultimately led to the CHIP guidelines being adopted by the full VEPC Council at our annual retreat on October 22nd of this year. Additionally, we were able to hire a full-time staff member on November 3rd of this year who will be fully dedicated to managing the CHIP program. In response to the statutory requirement of providing a report on the consideration for amending the definition of a CHIP housing development site, and we submitted that report to the committees of jurisdiction on December 15th of 2025, the VEPC Council voted not to make any further changes at this time, deciding to keep the program as simple as possible for municipalities to administer. We realize that this is a brand new program, and we do not want to create any additional administrative burdens for municipalities that are just learning how to use and administer the TIF financing model. Yesterday, VEPC held its first of a 3-part series in coordination with the Council for Development Finance Industry or agencies to understand tax increment financing and the CHIP program. Of note, we had over 260 participants registered for that webinar yesterday. There is certainly enthusiasm, curiosity, and demand for these webinars. 80% of the participants yesterday were from state or municipal government entities, quasi-public agencies, or local nonprofits, with local developers, consultants, or others rounding out the attendance list. The next dates for these free CDFA trainings are January 13th and 15th. These free trainings are also are recorded and will be available for you to go and review at your leisure on our website. Additionally, the online pre-application CHIP interest form went live on Tuesday evening and is available on our CHIP website. The purpose of the CHIP interest form is to help VEPC staff understand the municipal interest as it relates to the CHIP program and the timing of the CHIP projects so that our staff can better inform the council as to when we will be able to be reviewing these projects and the demand for the municipal interest. Any questions on the progress that the council has made over the course of the last 7 months before I move on? Hearing none, keep going. So for the remainder of the presentation this afternoon, I'm going to be providing you a high-level overview of the guidelines and the statutory requirements. I'm happy to come back and provide you additional information as we roll out the program. I would like to thank Representative Duke for being our legislative liaison throughout the summer months, and Senator Harrison, because they really did help the council in making sure that we were keeping within the legislative intent and also making sure that we were staying and following the statutory criteria. So in order for infrastructure improvements to be eligible, the guidelines follow the statute. Infrastructure improvements to be eligible must, one, serve a public good and directly support the development of an eligible housing development. Secondly, the eligible infrastructure improvement must result in new or rehabilitated housing developments where at least 60% of the floor area of the projected housing development is dedicated to primary residences, or the projected housing development must meaningfully address the purpose of the program if it does not meet that 60% floor area requirement. Of note, if the projected housing development does not meet the criteria for an affordable housing development, the projects must meet the but-for test. While the CHIP program is paying off the increment debt, all of the housing units must be for primary occupancy. All applications for CHIP program will be accepted on a rolling basis until December 31st of 2035. This slide explains the process from start to finish relating to a municipality for a CHIP project. And again, this is a very high-level overview. I'm not going to get into the nuances of this. This slide would be very dense if I were to do that. At the heart of every municipal application, we keep the purpose, the legislative purpose of the program at the heart of this. And the legislative purpose of the CHIP program is to encourage the development of new primary residences for households of low and moderate income across both rural and urban areas of all Vermont counties that would not be created but for the infrastructure improvements funded by the program. So the municipality is always the applicant. And so on the far left here, you'll see that we have the municipality listed there. The municipality is going to create a housing development plan, a housing development site, and a housing infrastructure agreement. Those are all outlined in the statute and in the guidance. The municipality will then submit that and the supporting documentation into the portal that the VEPC staff is now creating. That portal, as I said, will be hopefully up and running in about 2 to 3 weeks. Once that is submitted through the portal, VEPC staff will review those documents. And if those documents are deemed complete, VEPC staff will schedule a site visit with the municipality. We will go out, we will see the proposed site, and then we will schedule with the municipality a time for the municipality to come to the council. The municipality will then come to the council, and the council will review the application and ask further questions about the application. VEPC Council, with the support of the 3 non-voting members that the legislature added to review and approve the CHIP applications. And for those of you that may or may not remember, Commissioner Farrell serves as one of those new members. Maura Collins, or her designee from VHFA, serves as a 2nd member, and Gus Seelig, or his designee from VHCB, serves as the 3rd non-voting member. Those 3 folks will review those applications with the council. Once VEPC approves the CHIP site, the infrastructure project can begin. The municipality will then either bond or work with the developer or the sponsor to finance and then construct the infrastructure project. The infrastructure project can either occur at the same time as the new private development, or the new private development may occur after the infrastructure project has occurred. VEPT doesn't get in the middle of that. Once that infrastructure has occurred or is occurring simultaneously, that new housing construction happens. That new housing construction increases that municipality's grand list values. Those new grand list values create new tax revenue. Those brand new tax revenues are then shared with the municipality and the state. Those new tax revenues are then used to pay for that infrastructure that caused that new housing to be created. And those new tax revenues will then pay off that infrastructure debt. Once that infrastructure debt is then repaid, all of the new tax revenue that was generated will then go back to the education fund. This slide now explains the amount of CHIP increment that can be retained by the municipality depending on the type of housing that is going to be created. As you'll see here, there are 4 types of housing. There's 2 types of affordable housing. There's moderate income housing and there's market rate housing. And these are all created statutorily. The area median income limit is different for each housing type, and the income limits vary geographically using the Federal Housing and Urban Development Guidelines. There is no income limit on the market rate housing. Although I will note that there is no luxury housing to be created, there will be no second homes that will be allowed in an application, and there will be no vacation homes that will be allowed to be created in the application. Because the purpose of the program, as is outlined in the legislative purpose, is for primary residences. The percentage of housing units created for each housing type varies between affordable and moderate income. Affordable units is 15% and moderate is 25%. The income retention rates. All projects must retain 85% of the municipal tax increment. However, a municipality may retain up to 100% of their municipal tax increment. There are different education tax increment rates for market housing versus the affordable and moderate income housing. The market rate housing is capped at 75%, and the affordable and moderate income is capped at 85%. Lastly, there is a but-for test, and that's going to be required for the moderate income and the market rate CHIP projects only. That will mean that for those projects, a municipality would need to demonstrate that the proposed housing development either would not occur or would occur in a significantly different way if the municipality did not have the ability to utilize the CHIP financing. This next slide outlines the major municipal responsibilities for a CHIP project. The first is that a municipality needs to submit that CHIP interest form. The CHIP interest form, as I said before, really helps the VEPC staff understand what the municipality is thinking in terms of their CHIP project. On our website, there is the link to that, and we are also using that form to gather data because we want to come back to the legislature to be able to tell you and not speculate what is going on in the communities. And it's really important for me to be able to provide you actual data and evidence about what is working and what is not working. And so that CHIP interest form is a way for us to actually start gathering that information. And then the other pieces I did explain earlier in my presentation about providing the notice of the housing development plan and the housing infrastructure agreement to the legal voters of the municipality, submitting the CHIP application to BEPC, posting the site visit. In the statute, we do have a timeline. We have to provide a note, an answer to the municipality within 90 days of doing the site visit. And then once the application has been approved, the municipality will need to then verify that the developer and the sponsor's activities comply with what's outlined in their infrastructure agreement. They'll need to ensure that the infrastructure improvements are actually constructed as agreed upon by the developer. They'll need to confirm the total cost of the infrastructure projects, validate the amounts of the education and municipal taxes that have been retained. And we work with the Department of Taxes now on TIP projects. We intend to collaborate with the Department of Taxes for CHIP as well. Additionally, the municipalities will need to fulfill annual reporting requirements and financial audits. I'm not going to go through today all of the allowable improvements, but we did take into consideration through the testimony that we heard throughout the legislative session and through public comment and through looking at our TIP rule, the types of allowable improvements that will be available to CHIP projects. There are a number of infrastructure improvements that are allowed. There are a number of transportation improvements that are allowed, site preparation, and soft costs. There are also related costs that are allowed, and these are taken from the TIP rule. Lastly, the infrastructure agreement. This is really the meat of the CHIP project. This is the agreement. It's a legally binding agreement between the municipality and the sponsor and the developer that includes all of the terms that would be related to the infrastructure financing terms, the affordability components of the CHIP project, the number of housing units that will be created, the timelines for the project, infrastructure projects and the housing units, and all of the performance assurances. These are outlined not only in statute, but then there's also additional guidance for the municipalities as well. And I'm not going to go through the fine print here. You all have these slides and can ask follow-up questions. Happy to answer them. And again, we'll be coming back to you if we notice that we need to make any changes once the program gets launched. That is all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions. I also have Commissioner Farrell here with me, and he can answer any housing related questions. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Good question.
You mentioned that no luxury housing would be allowed. How is luxury housing defined?
So the council hasn't defined luxury housing, and I think that that is something that's going to need to be addressed by the council, and that we would need to look at on a application by application basis based on the community's needs.
Is one more sort of related question, which is how are municipalities, how are they on the hook to make sure that none of these are second homes?
So there are compliance requirements in the statute that say that municipalities are required to look to see that biennially that they're going to certify through homestead forms and or through landlord certifications that they're in compliance.
Dave?
Many of our discussions, commerce and economic development, and what I'm hearing from constituents is a concern that those municipalities that are already geared up for planning for send staff to process these applications. Maybe at a serious advantage. Is there any kind of a vetting of applications, or is it strictly first come, first serve, or will there be a geographic distribution followed to allow the Fairhavens and other smaller communities to apply?
Sure. So the council at this time has chosen not to prioritize applications. However, the chair has signaled that should there come a need to prioritize applications, that the council would consider doing that in the future. But right now, the council is focused on launching the program and seeing what we get for applications. And then if we need to prioritize, we will.
Representative Wozniak?
Thank you. Just putting a finer point on Representative Burkhart's question. So verifying the primary residency of these units will be accomplished through the homestead or the landlord certificates. That's the mechanism that y'all are looking for to confirm.
That's what's in the statute that's required.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you've had over 260 participants in your first webinar. I think just solely from like a housing development standpoint, are you seeing like municipalities attend? Like, do you have a census of that? And not that you need to share it, but like, are you seeing new developers? Are you seeing new municipalities who don't normally reach out for these types of programs? I think that's something that we look at. I know that Commissioner Farrell was in yesterday and talking about how VHIP, we've seen a number of new smaller developers. And I'm just wondering what, the interest that we know is there, like, are you seeing the change or even more names, different names?
So we don't typically hear from developers in the other programs that we administer. So Bexy administers the Veggie program, which is a business incentive program, and the TIF program, which is largely a municipal-based program that has typically been an economic development driver. I will just say anecdotally, we have heard from a few developers that are interested in utilizing the tool. So we'll just wait and see and continue to gather data and report back.
Great.
May I tag along?
Of course.
For the record, Commissioner.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. For the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development. We do hear often from communities that are contemplating how they're going to meet their housing targets. And so what I'll say, again, anecdotally, I'll be interested to see the data as some of the pre-applications come in. Anecdotally, communities that their historic annual average production is on the low side, we are seeing those communities come in and say, we recognize this as an opportunity. This might help us meet our housing target. We do want to talk about this. So the VETSI team has been incredibly good at creating a catalog. Who has been reaching out, who wants that information, adding them to newsletters and making sure communication gets out to them. So again, at least anecdotally, we are hearing this encourage communities to step into a space where they hadn't previously.
Can I follow? How are, in the guidelines, is there any, outreach discussion on how we're getting this out to communities?
So I will say, thank you for that question, that VLCT did get a $500,000 MVRC grant to provide technical assistance to municipalities. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I know that for CHIP to work, you need to have a partnership with a housing developer in order to be able to submit an application. So I would anticipate that there's going to need to be a lot of education. We have been sharing out the webinars. I was encouraged to see in the other, we did the poll before the kickoff of the webinar yesterday, and in the others section in the chat, there were a handful that made up that 8% of developers that were coming to that webinar. So the word is, I think, getting out there.
Great.
This is a new program and it's a novel concept in Vermont. So it's going to take a lot of education and a lot of communication.
Following up on that, first of all, the $500,000 grant, was that to provide technical assistance solely for the CHIPS program?
Yes.
I'm delighted to see it's been that productive so far. Have you received any inquiries, anecdotally or otherwise, from communities saying, gee, we'd like to, but we need help? How do we get help? Like, who can pay for a consultant, or because small towns can't do this themselves if the entire town staff consists of a clerk.
Yeah.
Town clerk. So have you gotten any of that back? Like, where do we get help? Who can pay for it?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, we probably have gotten some of that feedback. And we've referred them to DHCD for some municipal planning grants. There are other types of state grants that are available. And I think that over the next few months, we'll be working with VLCT to roll out that type of technical assistance to provide those potentially consulting type services.
I had a quick question about I thought that under related costs, you have like planning and consulting fees as part of the loan that you're.
So yes, thank you for that clarifying question. So they are allowed, however, those costs are only, think of it as like a reimbursement, because you would not be able to get your money back until the increment is generated. So, right. So it's not an upfront. You have to build the infrastructure, you have to do the consulting work. And then once the new tax revenues are generated, that's when you would be reimbursed for those. So there might be some upfront costs to the municipality.
I just had another, I don't know, maybe a question, but related to so we've kind of set up the parameters of requiring that it be a primary residence, like affordability kind of goals as well. What type of, how do you foresee, I can see how you're going to verify this. What do you do for remedy, or what kind of penalty? How do we prevent the whole project from, a bank being nervous about getting involved at all? They see it as that get undermined.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And we currently have compliance measures that are already in place for the TIP program. And we have also addressed that in our guidelines. So if, for example, a project in the TIP world comes out of compliance, or there's a misuse of TIP funds, the municipality comes back to the council for what they call a substantial change request. And the council works with that municipality to bring them back into compliance. There has never been a case in my understanding of looking at any of the 8 TIPs that are currently in Vermont, where the Betsy Council has stripped the increment entirely from a municipality. Are there instances where a municipality may have to repay the ed fund for increment that they used that they shouldn't have? Yes. So that is something that happens on a case-by-case basis. And I think that that is something that we would just need to continue to monitor, and that every municipality, just like every bank, is going to have to weigh their risks and their projects on an individual basis.
So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate the heavy lift of starting a new program, developing all of the infrastructure necessary to make it comprehensive and easy to follow. So just want to thank you for that. That's really, you need to be recognized for all of the work that you've been doing since we left session. I know you said yesterday was the day that the pre-applications opened, right? People could start.
Tuesday at 5:00.
Okay. So this week. So when do you anticipate having information for us on how it's going, on what's happening, on, how long it takes? Like, what percentage of pre-applications turn into applications and what percentage of those get approved? Like, are we looking at 12 months probably? Are we looking at 6 months?
Yeah, I think, so I think when we were creating the reporting
Let's see what she
requirements.
says now. Go
Sorry.
ahead. We're waiting,
Go ahead,
we're
Jess.
hanging on your answer. So
I think when we were in the legislative session and we were coming up with the reporting requirements, I think the first report back to the legislature is, I want to say it's in December maybe of 26, or maybe even January of 27. But I was in Senate Economic on Wednesday, and I think Senator Clarkson was going to be inviting me back maybe in March, just to kind of give an update. So maybe you can have a Senate and a House hearing in this room, and I could just come and give you all a big update at that time.
We'll get on the meeting. That's great.
Yeah.
Do you think that you'll have enough information by March?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
we can check in with you and then see.
Yeah.
I want to follow up a little bit on a few things you've said about sort of the process for, especially for communities that have lower capacity.
Mhm.
If, say, someone comes with an application that might be on the gray zone of whether it has luxury housing or not luxury housing, if you're in sort of a, we'll know it when we see it scenario,
Mhm.
and then they didn't think they saw it and you see it, does their application get rejected? How does that work?
Yeah, so what we do now with TIP is there's a lot of back and forth. And Commissioner Duxon is here and he happened to be involved with the Rutland TIP district and he can speak to that. Betsy's staff work with municipalities and we go back and forth. And one of the, I would say, benefits of having somebody like Alex and Maura and Gus is that they're the experts in housing. So they have that data that can tell us what a luxury house would look like in Bennington County versus what luxury homes would look like in Wyndham County or wherever, right? So you'll be able to give us that data. We can go back and say, look, this is what the data says about housing, the housing markets. And we also know that housing markets are going to change over time. This is a 10-year program. We can't have it be static and say, what your house was valued at 10 years ago is not what your house is going to be valued at 10 years from now.
Well, it might be, but right in the middle, it's not, certainly not, yes.
Exactly. So that's what I would say is we will work with an applicant to make sure that their application can move forward without just saying, no, you're done. And then in the guidelines, just to also say, if the council, if the municipality is like, no, we want to go forward, and then they go forward and the council says no, in the guidelines, it says, we will provide you a written denial, and this is what you need to do to come back to the council.
And the sort of changing market is why you wouldn't put it in rules?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jessica. I'm not sure if it's a guidelines question or a process question in terms of calculating the tax increment retention. Where does that start? How do you verify it? Is it from the applicant? Is it from VEPSI?
It comes from the Department of Tax.
So walk us through the idea. Not through the actual math, but in terms of the flow, if a project developer comes to you with a development agreement, says, this is what we think the tax increment is, that then goes to tax and that comes to you? How does it work?
Yeah, so the municipality is always the applicant.
Yeah.
So the developer is not going to be coming to us and saying, this is what it's going to be. So, the municipality would come to us and, we're working on this in the spreadsheets right now in the software. So, there's no easy answer, Charlie. I'm gonna give you that. But I'm happy to give you that answer offline
That sounds
and
good.
give you the spreadsheets that walk you through that increment calculation because it's over
The lifetime.
the lifetime of the project. And then I can tell you that it is verified by Jeff Carr before it comes to the council.
Can you send that to Sorsha and send it to Charlie?
Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Representative Holcomb.
Can you help me understand, I mean, when they initiate the proposal, they project out the tax rates that they expect, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
But in calculating the increment, there's an expectation of the increment that will be retained based on projected tax rates.
Mhm.
What happens if we have a significant change in the funding formula or significant mergers, or if there's some change in demand on the ed fund that radically changes what those tax rates are? How is that trued up or adjusted?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. Again, I think that is something that would need to be. I'd have to talk to Jeff Carr about that. He's the one that really does all of those calculations, and he's the one that does all of that truing up and the increment. We rely on our executive branch economist and the Department of Tax for the administration of that portion of the program.
Maybe we can have a separate session with Jeff and the tax department and you and
That would be-
show some of these.
Yeah.
Unless anyone from another committee wants to come for that.
Well, just a very basic question. When, let's say there's when tax increment is established, bonds are issued. The bonds are paid off by the tax increment. Does the moral obligation of the state stand behind that?
Yes.
I mean, I think.
Stand behind the
that's
bond?
behind the bond payments.
Yes.
Which mean, I think that's partly the answer to your question.
No, I don't think
That's
it-
not the answer. You should get more tax.
I don't know if it does.
It's
Do you want-
really, I mean, we do this in TIF.
Okay.
It's not a controversial, it's just that I don't have the information here in front of me.
Mhm.
It's something that we use in TIF. It's a modeling tool. And I just was not prepared to have the answers to those questions today. But I'm certainly happy to come back and provide you that modeling. And it's going to be in the portal in about 2 to 3 weeks.
That sounds great. I think the moral obligation might sit with the municipality, but we can look into that.
Okay, I think it's time that we move on. Jess, thank you very much. I will say that congratulations. And you were true to your word. You told us, the conference committee, legislature, that you would have this done by January, and you've done it. So congratulations to you, the VEPSI board, and congratulations also to the members, Abby, and to Senator Harrison, and everybody that sat on that special subcommittee to write these guidelines. So it's much appreciated. Thank you.
They are a volunteer council and they dedicated many hours of their time. That the VEPSI council is a volunteer. So they need to be recognized as well for their dedication and their commitment to the state of Vermont for their efforts. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, did you have more to add?
Unless there's anything the chairs and committees would like from me, I've done it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Okay, I just didn't know you were safe. It's all there. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, John. How are
Hi,
you?
John.
How's it going? John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. So, I guess I'm happy to approach this in different ways. I think your request had been to try to think about the CHIP guidance in relation to the legislative intent behind what we see in Act 69. Kind of been in the same posture as you guys throughout this testimony, listening in and getting a sense for what's going on here. I think I could start with identifying some places that I think of as they're not problematic areas, but throughout the process of developing the guidelines, I kind of had more questions to Betsy as to where the direction fit within the legislative intent. I would reiterate what the executive director said. There was back and forth during that process. It was a nice communicative approach to working through the guidance. So I'm happy to start with kind of areas that I most thought about while thinking of these pieces. And then maybe another way we could do this afterwards, depending on the approach that you'd like to take. Things that you've identified in the guidance that you're interested to know more about. I may have thoughts as to how they relate to the particular language, or if there are things you would like me to look into, happy to come back and talk about other pieces, but happy to start with kind of the high level things that stood out to me. And just to state again, these aren't things where there are issues, they're just things that stood out to me as kind of warranting more investigation. So with that said, the first piece I would note is, and if it's helpful, I can pull up. You see, I'm on Betsy's page looking at the guidance. I could share just a second. I'm going to start with the definition of housing development site, just because I think it's something worth flagging for potential legislative consideration. So just a second, I'll do that. And just before I hop in, so everyone recalls, the housing development site is analogous to what you would see as a TIP district under standard statewide tax increment financing. It's the area in which your OTB is set and in which you generate the increment. And by statute in Act 69, it is the parcel or parcels on which the housing development that's being financed here, the infrastructural improvements for the housing development are being financed. It's where that housing development is situated. And one of the key things from last year that you may recall was the tightness of the site, right? It was just the parcel or parcels on which that housing development was going. So let me just share something to kind of foreground for thinking heading into session. And this is a technical piece, which is why Betsy raised this. Let's see if I can get. Can you see that at all?
Yeah.
Look at that. Okay. So just to read aloud here, what you see in the guidance, housing development site, the whole parcel or parcels where the housing development will occur. If the development is to occur over multiple parcels, parcels must be contiguous. Only parcels where the housing development is to occur can be included in the housing development site. That's what we were just discussing, the parcels which is situated. And then there's this phrase, the unless contiguous parcels are under common ownership and share a school property account number, in which case they must also be included. I just wanted to flag this line. The reason, and I'm sure that you can ask Betsy as well, but the reason that this was proposed to be included, this unless contiguous parcels, is I understand that it relates to the actual administration of the parcels themselves, that these wouldn't be separated because they do share a span. So I'm just calling out that the definition that you see here could conceivably be technically larger than just the parcel or parcels on which that housing development is situated, because it might include contiguous parcels that share a span. And you may recall that There's a second law provision in Act 69 that also was triggering a report on the definition of housing development site in anticipation of this exact concern. That's just the first piece that I wanted to note. It's really a technical provision relating to what the scope is for that housing development site. And please jump in.
You don't by any chance know the process for changing a span, do you?
I do not know that.
Okay. I was just thinking Mark probably did, and I'm gonna ask him after.
Okay.
Okay.
The next piece, I think, would just be naturally a place where I might expect folks to have questions. You may recall back and forth on the definition of improvements from last session and this debate around public purpose versus public good. At the time, there was thinking that improvements that would need to be for a public purpose would be publicly owned. And so there was this shift to using the language of public good. And that's what you see here. So I think folks might have questions about what constitutes a public good if it's not publicly owned. And you can see in the Pepsi guidelines, these are what have been set out here. So your improvements can be publicly owned, and publicly accessible, privately owned and publicly accessible, or, and this is kind of the most meaningful category where I would expect questions, privately owned and privately accessible, so long as the municipality can demonstrate a community benefit from the CHIP supported infrastructure project. So this is the way that the guidelines are building out what that concept of public good is. And you can see that there's a requirement for articulation with evidence, how they are mutually beneficial for the municipality and developer.
Couldn't you define any property that increased the grand list as
Broadly for the public,
mutually beneficial for the municipality?
people could make arguments that, yes.
Okay.
But this is a term that just stood out to me, and I was kind of interested in following the process just because it is a bit more mutable. It's a bit more, feels like you can use this as a tool throughout the process, but here are the set of guidelines and you can see the requirement for demonstration of evidence. I think throughout the process, the 60% floor area is the place that I was most kind of closely following along to see what would happen. I think that the executive director's testimony was extremely clear on Betsie's approach to this. That regardless of this floor area threshold, all housing units would need to be primary residences for the duration of the indebtedness. So I think the executive director addressed that piece, but that's just an area that I was following along because if you saw earlier instances of the guidance, you may recall that there was some thought that you could have 60% be dedicated to primary residence and potentially have other housing units that aren't contributing toward the threshold serve as non-primary residence, essentially. That's not in this version. The published guidance is clear. If it's a housing unit for the duration of the indebtedness, it has to be a primary residence. And you've already heard earlier that that would be demonstrated biannually by the homestead declaration or that landlord certificate.
I have another question. So I came upon some guidance from a realty group. And I think the tax department sort of simultaneously came upon similar guidance from a realty group, and they've submitted a request for us to make some changes to our property transfer tax statute. Because folks have found a workaround that essentially you buy a property, issue a long-term lease, and then take back that long-term lease fairly quickly. And so I'm curious if you could imagine a similar workaround in this scenario and how a municipality,
Right. I would have to think more, but the way that you've presented it, I don't see why you couldn't equally attempt something in the same context, right? But I would need to think more about it.
Okay.
I recall that not only is it the 60%, but if the development largely fulfills the purpose of the chapter, which is to create more low and affordable income housing or low and moderate income housing, then it still passes that test.
That's right. The project
flexibility for VEPC in that sense.
The project criteria contemplate two avenues. One is that you meet the 60% floor area threshold described here. And the other is that you meaningfully address the purposes of the chapter, which the executive director went through. That's actually the point that I was going to hit next, is part of what I'm getting at here is identifying the terms that are kind of most malleable. And so I'm going to hopefully not cause whiplash, but I'm trying to find, yes, here we go. So looking at the process for application, you'll see that the housing development plan that includes, second bullet, the proposed housing development including the anticipated floor area dedicated to housing. It's less than 60% a narrative about how that projected housing development meaningfully addresses the purposes of the CHIP program. I think this is an area to pay attention to. What does it mean to meaningfully address? But you can see that the additional provision that's been added here, supplementing what exists in Act 69, is to require a narrative component to that to get at that piece. But you're right, there's two avenues. You don't necessarily have to meet the 60% threshold. Sorry, just a second. The other pieces I think worth noting in the guidance are just areas that stand out to me, beyond what you might recognize from Act 69, just because they do go further, are requirements for the Housing Infrastructure Act. And actually gonna flip and those conditions. Yes. Okay. So if you see on the screen here, a set of bullets for the Housing Infrastructure Agreement, just note that there's some additional provisions included here which build out the concepts from the program. So under statute, what you'll see if you just look at Act 69 is the first 5 of these bullets, right? Identification of sponsor, developer, and housing development. Make sure you obligate those tax increments exclusively for the purposes to which they're intended to be dedicated. You can see the primary residency requirement, which is built into the Housing Infrastructure Agreement. And then you can see this performance assurance piece. I did just want to note so that you'll know places to look. Include expected outcomes, including the percentage of floor area dedicated to housing, number of units, number of affordable housing units, and expected development value. A detailed description of the infrastructure improvements, the types of costs and amounts of cost of the improvement that may be financed with that. Provision that expressly defines, this one's particularly, a provision that expressly defines the obligations of the municipality and sponsor and or developer in the event that that tax increment generated by the housing development project falls short of the financing. This is particularly significant because, as you'll recall, under statute, the municipality would be required to make whole the ed fund regardless of what's happening in the property value. So this is saying the housing infrastructure agreement needs to establish some kind of obligation for what's done here. This doesn't specify, it doesn't identify a party that would cover that hole essentially, but it says you need to build this out in your housing infrastructure agreement. So there's not ambiguity as to what's going to happen in the event of shortfall. Additionally, you can see that the municipality shall provide notice of these terms to the legal voters, which is under statute. Let's see. I think the other interesting piece to note in the guidance is the amendments process, which is just in part where you're going to hear me identifying here is things that we talked less about in committee, right? In committee, we talked about what's in statute. You didn't especially need guidance to build these things out, but I wanted to hit some of the pieces that will be novel if you are familiar with the act. You're just looking at the guidance now. Let me pause for just a second, but Betsy's identified in the guidance some of the approach for amendments. Yes, so it's section 9 of the guidance. And you can see that this sets out a process and identifies some of the pieces that would require Betsy approval. So any significant changes require Betsy's review and approval before proceeding. You apply for a substantial change request, submit a narrative explaining that desired change. And those documents would be approved by the legislative body at a hearing. And then this is non-exhaustive, but setting out some of the things that you could imagine triggering this amendment process to your plans. So increase in the CHIP funded portion, actually changing the scope of the infrastructure project itself, increase in the approved debt ceiling. As you know, the debt ceilings and the retention percentages and the like can vary, right? Think about the retention percentages are up to a maximum figure. So just noting, this is an area you can look if you're trying to identify the sorts of things that might trigger an amendment. With that, I'm gonna pause. I think it might be helpful just to see if folks have specific pieces they either would like to hear my thoughts on or have me look more into, or however you guys might best want to proceed.
Questions?
Yes, Ashley.
Triggering an amendment, something changes, is that on VEPSI to reach out to the municipality, or is that on the municipality to reach out to VEPSI and say, hey, X, Y, and Z has changed?
Yep, so should have not stopped screen share. It's on, no, it's not, it's my fault. As you can see, it's on the municipality. Any significant change requires VEPSI's review and approval before proceeding. So the municipality has an incentive to, right, they're not going to be able to move forward with a proposal until they do in fact reach out to VEPSI for that review and approval.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks very much. It's always good to hear legislative council go through and describe the details there. It gives it a lot more insight to what's going on. Can I go back to the comments on the common benefit issue? I think that's what it was. I think there was some guidance, and I was having a little trouble.
The public good.
Common good. Okay. Yes. Common good. And I'm trying to recall exactly what the question was that you had about that.
Yep.
And I wasn't sure whether it was a question about the actual content of the guidance or just that it wasn't crystal clear, detailed kind of thing. And you know, there's a couple of ways, at least a couple of ways you draft that sort of stuff, right? You can create a general standard for an agency to apply to an agency or for the agency to apply to themselves, or you can try to do some specific stuff. But I'm trying to understand what the question is you had about that.
Yeah, so just to clarify from earlier, this was not something where I was identifying any particular issue. I was trying to remind the committee that last year there was a debate around the use of public service versus public good. Okay. And a lot of that debate came down to whether something was required to be publicly owned. You may recall there's some discussion as to whether or not the infrastructural improvements need to be public improvements. What does that mean? And where the statute landed was on this use of the term public good as against public purpose, which is thinking that infrastructural improvements could be privately owned, but they needed to serve a public good. And I was just identifying this is the place to look if you want to look within the guidelines to see this. And you can see the process that's set out here. Something privately owned and only privately accessible may be eligible so long as the municipality can demonstrate a community benefit. They would articulate with evidence how the community needs or desires the planned improvements mutually beneficial to the municipality and the developer. And that's when Representative Kornheiser pointed out kind of the malleability, the breadth of that term, because there's all sorts of arguments you can make as to how an infrastructural improvement might be mutually beneficial for the municipality and the developer that are quite broad, right? If you increase the property values, could that be argued to be mutually beneficial, even though it's privately owned and otherwise not offering that? So that's
And it's all coming back to it has a lot to do with the different nature of the towns, I think. In some of the small rural towns, you can be looking at that particular aspect about, okay, it's a private development, but what's the good there? So, yeah, I'll take a look at it a little more closely. First brush, looks pretty good.
Nice. Jonathan?
Thanks so much. John, this question is really about that notion of substantial change, the thresholds that are sort of articulated there in that portion we were just looking at. One thing that jumped out to me is one of the bullet points in the non-exhaustive list was changes in the sources of funding for the CHIP-funded portion of a project. My thought was, how sensitive, where is that threshold? I mean, I guess it's not, is it crystal clear, or is that also something, maybe you were just describing this just before we paused for questions, but that seems like something that might undergo some tweaking, start to finish. And I'm wondering how you're feeling about where all the reliance is for when it becomes substantive.
So I think that would be a question for Betsy. I can't help you so much with that, but just note that any amendments to your TIP financing plan, right, you're gonna have to go through if there's changes to the financing. You have to run that by Betsy, but I think I can't speak to that.
John, could you go back to that question that you had about maybe more than one parcel and span number issue?
Yes, just a second. And just to remind everyone, this was an issue that was forecasted at the end of last year. There was specific tasking as to whether or not to come back on this piece. So,
And we do have sort of an ongoing conversation happening with the GIS office and property valuation about exactly these things, even unrelated to TIF and CHIP and all that. And I think there might even be something in the miscellaneous tax language about it.
So the specific question here is in statute, the definition of housing development site is the tightest possible site definition. It's just the parcel, or if there are multiple parcels involved on which construction is occurring for the housing development, it's just those parcels where the housing development site is located. The specific issue here is that if someone had a neighboring contiguous parcel on which construction was not occurring, but that it shared a span, the assertion was that for administrative purposes, you wouldn't be able to separate out that parcel. And so the definition of housing development site would need to be broadened to include that contiguous parcel that does share the span. That's the question, is it administratively required that you include that additional parcel just for purposes of having your assessed values for the housing development site?
Okay, so again, if I got it clear, you're saying there might be a contiguous parcel with a different owner owned, so it would be a different parcel span.
In this, maybe another way to say this is if the same owner has multiple parcels adjoining each other, is it possible to have multiple parcels adjoining each other with different span numbers? Or if you do have adjoining parcels, do they automatically share a span, in which case see the technical necessity is that they would become part of that housing development.
Like you said, we may get clarification, but if it's a contiguous piece of property owned by the same owner, it's one span.
Yep, so that's the asserted justification for this particular technical provision, is saying that if you just follow directly the statute, which says only the parcel on which construction occurs and not this contiguous one held by the same owner, that because they share a span, they would be part. So that's where the problem comes from, and the problem that it's trying to solve.
Thanks.
And I guess I'd add, the reason that I'm curious about it is one of the sort of debated edges of TIF law is how sort of edge properties can be added or not added. And so if two parcels that were not owned by the same person became owned by the same person, and then someone could modify the span to include that now contiguous parcel, and would that then necessitate a substantial change request or not, because it was not previously within the span, but now it's within the span? And if we hadn't spent all of these years sort of at the edge of TIF policy every year, for some reason, I never would have wondered how a person changes his span, but.
And you could imagine just the economic effect from the increment generated would be sort of doubly large in a sense, because not only are you adding additional properties subject to taxation, they weren't included in the OTV against which the increment has been compared. So.
Thank you.
For those who may be scared to ask questions, if you have particular things that you want me to look at, you can shout them out, or you can email me and I can take a look.
Or just speak them at a regular volume.
That'd be great too.
Thank you.
Great. John, thank you very much.
Josh?
Teddy, did you have a question?
No, I was agreeing with your point.
Oh, Charlie thought you did. Okay.
Thanks, Joe. Representative Gimbel.
And then Representative Canfield got involved. Everyone was really looking out for you.
I'm so appreciative to have you back with my committee.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us.
Director Josh Hanford, Director of Inter and Supplemental Relations at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Happy to be here with all three committees. As you know, Vermont League of Cities and Towns represents all the cities, towns, and most of the villages in the state of Vermont. They're our members. We refer to them as our members. Again, thank you all for the incredible work you did last year on CHIP. You know, it was a lot of work. We've had great interest from our members, you know, many saying this is a game changer that they've been waiting for. We've had numerous requests from members for training and resources and templates and guidance and consultants and project managers, and the list goes on and on and on. We've provided at least 3 sort of educational awareness type trainings for our members early on, which did nothing more than generate more hunger for more guidance and more direct technical assistance. And since then, we've applied for a Northern Border Regional Grant Program, which you heard about in earlier testimony. We were just announced that we received that in mid-December. We don't have a grant agreement yet. We don't have a signed agreement, but plans are underway. We're in the process of trying to get that grant agreement and to come up with our match award that's required for that. But our hope is we will begin offering assistance in mid-February. And we're calling that Vermont's Chip in Vermont, Chip Invest in Vermont. And the type of
We're all very pleased with your marketing.
Okay. Well, good to see some laughing. The type of assistance that'll be provided with that is a base level. You heard it. We need continuing education, but then we need some sort of foundational trainings of what CHIP is, what's required. We're planning to create some tools and resources, a resource library that has template documents, template agreements, a CHIP increment calculator, so you can run numbers. Obviously, there's a lot of need for the infrastructure development agreement and not having every community start from scratch around that and incurring significant attorney fees right out of the gate. So we're going to work on that. We're going to include the RPCs and RDCs in some of these trainings and use them where we can. You know, one area that our work isn't going to address that probably is a need out there somewhere is support for the home builders and the small developers. Like, those aren't our members, but the municipality can't submit an application unless they're bringing these projects and working, but their needs are different than the municipal needs. So that might be something to think about from that sort of workforce and the actual building of the home side that you may hear other folks bring to you. We're going to develop like a municipal cohort of the that are submitting projects and work with them throughout the application process and guidance. And so they can learn from each other peer to peer, and we can have a group that we're bringing along at the same time and training and helping them get that application submitted. We're also aware that we need to help them with their sort of community support and their public engagement, getting votes, securing bond counsel. There's a lot of work that's going to go into this and working with municipalities to make sure that they're successful. And it sort of doesn't stop there. If they get awarded, we need to help them with the risk management side of things, any RFPs and ROIs, contract agreements, auditing, all of that compliance continues. We want to make sure that folks, complete their reporting and their auditing and TIF account management, and sort of following along the lines of what we did with ARPA funds. VLCT had some resources to help municipalities comply with the ARPA, utilize it meet the compliance deadlines. And, you know, from what we've heard from our National League of Cities, Vermont was rated the best in full ARPA utilization and compliance across. So we hope to sort of have that same level of support for our our CHIP members that go after this new resource. So the grant agreement isn't signed. There's still a lot of work to do here. We have to, you know, submit our final plan. They have to agree. So I don't want to get into too detail exactly how this is going to play out in timelines because it's not set in stone yet. But those are the general ideas. And our team at the LCT, not Samantha and I that you see here, but the municipal operations support team that has a municipal finance specialist, a sort of a municipal business back office specialist, people that know municipal work are going to be the team that delivers this. And it's planned to be a 3-year grant. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on this sort of grant.
Is your grant going to be just for your membership?
Yes, because the applicants are all municipalities.
And in all municipalities?
All municipalities.
You mentioned that the grant was matching, so this would be $1 million total?
No, it's
like
a 20% match.
20%, yes, okay. One more question. Have you were mentioning about a meeting that we're probably going to need to think about how we're working with developers. Have you had any conversations with the Homes for All folks?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had meetings with Home for All folks, some of the RDCs and RPCs, VEPC staff. There's a lot of people that know we all need to coordinate and work well for this to be successful.
Josh, can you tell us about your chip implement calculator?
I can't give you details, but you know, I know the hope is a very simple one, that folks will be able to crunch some numbers early on to see if this thing will work for their project. You know, there's a lot of ideas and projects out there. And what we've told our members is CHIP is available to every community. It might not be the right fit for every housing project for a lot of reasons. And we've got to see if the public infrastructure that they need is supported by the new tax increment, whether that works out, the numbers, the units, all of that. There's got to be a simple way for folks to get some early indicators of whether this is the right path to go down.
I think it's great that you're coming up with some standardized tool to use so that municipalities could use that. And look forward to looking at the details.
Absolutely.
The interest that you've seen so far from municipalities, can you give us an idea of the size of the municipalities that are contacting you? Because I think, you know, one of our big things about CHIP was we need to get into the rural communities.
Absolutely. It's all sizes. We have board members on the VLCT board, which is a subset, but very dedicated, and they're all different sizes. And they have project ideas from their communities. We talk about it regularly. It's every size community. What we understand about the cohort idea and helping folks, some of the more sophisticated communities that have already done big TIF, you know, they might not need that hand holding, but some of the smaller ones that maybe have never even gone out to bond before, they're going to need a group of people, peers to work with and work through this. And that's the idea there.
And so to follow up, are you imagining that quite small towns and villages might be able to do this in partnership with you and the rest of their cohort without hiring a consultant?
That's a good question. I don't know. There may be projects that maybe could do it without a consultant, but it depends on sort of the sophistication of who the developer is coming with them as well. That's a big mystery, right now. There's a lot of interest from a lot of municipalities. We don't hear directly from the developers as much, but we've had a few inquiries, and it's got to be the right match with what the community can handle and their capacity and what the developer can bring to the table.
Thanks. Representative Wilson.
Thank you. What is your prioritization going to look like? Is it going to be first come, first serve? You know, Berry City, we have a very large municipal staff, but we may lack the expertise for one specific portion of this, whereas, you know, another town may need more respectful handholding through the process. So just curious as.
Yeah, no, great question. I think that's yet to be determined.
Okay.
If we first launch this and the number that want to join this intensive process is manageable, it'll be anyone that wants to come in. If it's overwhelming response, we'll have to find a way to do that. And, you know, I think that the conditions of the rule of the Northern Border Regional Grant will probably guide us on how to select the communities there.
I mean, what I would imagine happening is you can take on more communities that need less handholding and fewer communities sadly that need a lot more. But the communities that will get your help, hopefully will get successful projects underway. And that's really our goal. So
Absolutely.
hopefully that kind of balances out.
And the tools in the library, that'll be available to everyone. You know, so that there won't be any limits on that, but this intense group that's gonna have, like, there'll be, you know, only so many that we can sort of offer that to, and that will have to see the interest and how we prioritize, which I don't want to answer for Katie and Bonnie and Marguerite that'll be working on this, but I'm sure they're thinking about it.
Josh, real quick, and then we're gonna move on.
Okay. I'm just trying to get a clearer picture of who you're providing technical assistance to. I was really struck by something that Chair Mahali said earlier, that some of these towns are so small that the only municipal employee may be a clerk. And I always imagine technical assistance being provided to someone whose capacity you're kind of building so that they can then take the ball and run with it a little bit. But who are you providing assistance to if there's no one really working for the city?
Sure. You know, some of the smaller towns, not teeny, I don't know if that's an official, they have administrators, town administrators, could be them, certainly the select board. They're gonna have to make all these decisions. They're gonna have to know what the voters are gonna ask for. They could have we have to assist the listers and assessors to, you know, about the original taxable value of the property. There's a lot of municipal officials, whether they're employees, volunteers, elected, appointed, that are going to be involved in this. And they exist in every size community.
There are a number of towns in my county that have housing committees and only a part-time staff person.
Gail, did you have your hand up?
Yes. You mentioned that you don't really hear from developers, but have you heard of any developer in the town didn't want to participate?
No, I have heard directly from a few developers because they sort of know me from my old job. And first thing I do is refer them to the VEPSI website and refer them to the folks in town to start making that connection. But I have not heard of any developers come back and say no one in town is interested. In fact, just the opposite.
We're gonna.
Josh, thank you very much.
Okay, can I move on?
Yep, got a couple more?
Yes, and so just wanted to comment that the VEPSI board and staff, you know, did excellent work. It's a tremendous effort. They met all the deadlines. They kept key partners informed. They engaged with interested parties. We're really, really thankful to Jessica's leadership in that process. We've been supportive of the guidance issued and decisions they've reached. It's impressive work. There's one issue that I think you've heard a little bit, and it's come to our attention. We don't represent the developers. We don't represent the banks or the financial institutions. We represent the municipalities, and some of the city and town managers have brought this, as they did last year during legislation, around the primary residence requirement. Not that they disagree. Everyone fully supports that's the goal of this, but more of just how it's going to work out, how it's going to play out. And they're concerned about what the recourse is for the municipality if it doesn't work out. So this is likely not a problem for multifamily development. The nature of those deals are structured, the financing, the rental agreements, the accountability for the tenants to be primary residents are already baked into those deals. This is about home ownership. I think folks know. And so we don't speak, like I said, for the builders and developers, you'll have to ask, but it's just what we're hearing. With that all said, because those folks need to get mortgages that are buying home ownership if they're middle or lower income. So they're going to need to have a bank and someone to understand the conditions and what that may do to the future marketability. Regardless of this concern,
Are you saying you're not aware of how to provide them technical assistance to support them through that?
what I'm saying is that just like the city and town managers submitted last year, they're not sure if their select boards are going to be risk averse with this. They're typically pretty conservative. And if they're possibly any violations or enforcement issues, they don't know how they would rectify that. Like as far as what the recourse is this the sewer line now not available to that home? But more so, and this is where it's not my place, need to talk to mortgage bankers or whatever, but the folks that are going to buy those homes, they need mortgages and how that'll affect the conditions of those mortgages for folks that are particularly first-time home buyers and et cetera. If they're a potential market to sell and resell is diminished. But regardless of that, we're continue to believe that this is one of the most significant investments in housing and infrastructure, Vermont history. We're looking forward to working with our municipalities on CHIP projects and seeing new homes and neighborhoods built. So thanks for jumping into this so early and sort of rehashing the work you did. It was pretty impressive, and I think things are on the right track.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Bob Flint from Springfield Regional Development Corporation. It's like theater of the round, by the way. We're the RDC that serves Southern Windsor County, and I'm here representing the RDCs of Vermont. And repeating what Josh has said and others have mentioned, we really want to thank Jessica and Ellie and the council for making this work. I personally was at the October meeting when they approved the guidelines. I had a sense of how much time the council and subcommittees and so forth met, and somehow, some way, they met the deadlines, the program's on schedule. So salute to that. I'm going to talk about the experiences we've had at SRDC, as well as sharing some observations from my colleague Dave Snedeker, who is the director of NVDA up in the Northeast Kingdom. So we represent a mix of towns and probably those that don't have a lot of great, vibrant development. So it's been heartening to see that there's a lot of curiosity and conceptual interest in this CHIP program from communities in our regions. As I said, at least for my region, we don't have experienced developers hanging out in my office and doing deals because there's not a natural return on investment the same way there might be in other parts of the state. So that ROI is challenging, and we need to figure out whether it's CHIP or whatever tools, does the math work? Or in my term, I use a lot of sausage making. You don't want to know how it's made, you just want the end result. CHIP has the potential to be a key ingredient to make the math work. But as was said by Josh, particularly with municipalities, all of us, economic developers, private sector developers, municipalities, need to understand how this program works. And appreciating that while I'm a bureaucrat, I understand all the things that have been talked about today, but your average municipality probably doesn't. And certainly private sector developers outside of maybe, up north probably don't. So it's a language that's different, and it's vernacular that's different that we need collectively to educate them on to figure out if it's applicable to their project. So it's our job to work with VLCT and other stakeholders to handhold towns and developers and seeing how CHIP can be a piece of that puzzle. So in our region, there is conceptual interest in CHIP for projects Chester, Windsor, and Springfield. In the case of Springfield, the one that is closest to an application is from our local housing authority for an 18 to 19 unit condominium complex, which would be a complex combination of duplex, freestanding units, ideally tied to use for residents that could work in our local school district. The site is adjacent to our high school and to our CTE facility. In Windsor, Windsor Improvement Corporation, which is their local development corporation that we manage, is looking to construct a mixed-use building adjacent to the recently completed Central and Main project that Evernorth and Windsor Witham Housing Trust did. This project would have 8 housing units and 2 storefronts. As Representative Charlton knows, the town of Chester has formed a housing commission that's exploring options for several projects, including one potential large one on land adjacent to or near Green Mountain Union High School. Up in the kingdom, my friend Dave reports that several of his towns have expressed interest in the CHIP program. All attended the webinar yesterday and will watch the other ones. He said that MVDA, his organization, will likely support St. Johnsbury with a potential application as they move forward with the purchase of an 8-acre brownfield site, which is in a designated neighborhood area for a housing project that conceptually would have 24 to 40 units. As Josh mentioned, the primary residence requirement, neither Dave or I have heard about that specifically, but I know it's come up with some of my colleagues around the state. I'm sure there'll be additional conversations as things go along. So to wrap up, or at least for our region, and I think Dave's, education and cultivation are what we're focusing on for CHIP. There's not going to be an application coming next month. We're hopefully going to be in a position where we could do an application sometime in 2026. But it's about making sure all the partners understand what this program is and how it potentially could be of help. We, the RDCs, are very interested in having in-house technical assistance to take the TA that VLCT and others are providing and take it to a more granular level to help package and handhold projects through the process, much as we do with commercial development now. And being in a position to help our municipalities with that. And we're trying to work on how do we fund that, how do we build that capacity statewide through the RDC now. That, I'm happy to take any questions. Wow,
Thank
time from a row.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
We're worried about that last comment. I'm saving time for me. I don't have
Not much time, don't worry about it.
Roy Weinberg, the executive chair of Let's Build Homes. We got a chance to work with all of you over the one degree or another over the course of last year's session with the development of this program. We commend you on taking action on it. It was an issue that has hung out there unresolved for a long time. How can smaller communities be given access to this powerful tool? You found a way through. I really wanted to echo the comments that have been, I think, shared pretty much by all the other speakers, that the process that took place over the course of the summer, I think, was a model process for legislative implementation. There was the committee that led the process met regularly through the summer, very transparent and iterative engagement process. There was ample opportunity for many parties to give input and be heard. But there was urgency that drove the process, and they got it done. They got it done on time. It is remarkable and commendable that the program is opening later this month. I also want to just echo what has been said about the interest. That was news to me to hear that the 260 people were on the training call yesterday. But I'm not surprised from the conversations that we have had since the legislature adjourned. We had a summer engagement series that involved 7 different meetings around the state. CHIP was a major topic of conversation at every one of them, with scores of people coming to these meetings. There's a Vermont Development Conference in the fall, which is an annual event that has real estate professionals, largely developers, attorneys, engineers, various professionals and municipalities. By far the best attended session was one breakout session about CHIP. I think there was more than 200 people in the room for that. And every time, I've gone on the radio or sort of been in a public setting, there have been questions about this. And I think the reason
So I think it is very positive indication that there is such broad interest. I believe it is going to be well distributed around the state, not just the larger communities. I think the reason for that is that with this legislation, you have tapped into something old and important about what municipal governments are. There's some joke about the federal government that really the federal government is just like a big health insurance company with an army. And in a lot of ways, municipal governments are property managers with a police department. The bulk of what municipalities are responsible for is the creation and management and expansion of public infrastructure. And the ability of Vermont municipalities to do that work, the kind of agreement that you have worked out here now with CHIP, where you can have a municipality using future revenues created by public investment to encourage new private investment. That's the kind of thing municipalities did historically quite a bit of. And it has been harder to do with a statewide property tax for good reason. Certainly a firm supporter of what the statewide property tax does and what the equity that it drives in this state. It has changed that relationship of what municipalities can do working with builders to grow the grand list. I think what you've done with CHIP is restore some of that. And I think it's going to be quite exciting what the results of that are. And we'll soon see more. I think it might be by March that you'll have some greater indication than we do today about what kind of communities are coming forward. Certainly my message has been that there are lots of tools available, even for the smallest communities, not only the type of tools we've heard about from the league, which is very exciting, but also RTCs are looking into what they can do to support municipalities in their districts. Even the philanthropic community is watching this and looking for a way that they can add value and help these smaller communities. Engage us. The fact that you made a legislative decision to ensure that related costs, the costs incurred by municipalities could be paid for by the future taxes, or a key element in legislative decision that often comes up, and people are relieved when they hear that that's a possibility. So we're very hopeful and very optimistic and think to work on this so far, including this hearing. I mean, if every new piece of legislation got this kind of follow-up attention from the legislators passed it, it would be that'd be a great thing. I think it's encouraging for the future of this program that you're giving it this kind of early attention. I do want to. I don't think there's a need or probably an ability to get into detail on this. There is one implementation concern that we have that I just want to put squarely before you, so it's not a surprise if it has to come back to you in some way. It's my hope that it does. But I've heard all the questions here that have been here for the whole hearing. I've seen the interest and the commitment, the belief that this tool should be a tool for primary residences. And I think we're all aware of the challenge that secondary homes are in the state right now for there's some competition between second homeowners and primary residences. And that's your constituents bear the brunt of that. And I totally understand the interest and support the interest. This is a tool for primary residence development. There is a concern with the way the guidelines were finalized. There was a late change in the guidelines that makes it crystal clear that even though it's okay for 40% of CHIP project to be commercial, to be used for a use other than primary residence, that that's quite expansive. That could include convenience stores. It could include a whole range of commercial developments. It cannot include second homes, short-term rentals. And so that strict hard line on that has raised some questions about what will happen with not with rental projects, as Josh mentioned. I think rental projects will be fine, but for sale projects where the control and ownership after the initial sale leaves the developer's hands, leaves the municipality's hands. What happens down the road when one of the primary resident owners who has bought this, when they die and they leave the home to their children who not live in the state, and there's some extended delay before the estate can changes ownership. What and other life circumstances changes like that could the real estate market has to be able to deal with, and housing programs have found a way to deal with. I'm pretty sure there should be a way for housing programs to be able to manage this, and that has been the answer from Betsy so far, that the compliance enforcement provisions, as you questioned and heard answers to, are going to be worked out in these infrastructure agreements between municipalities and builders. And there's going to be an attempt to sort those kind of questions out in those agreements. Let's hope that works. There will certainly be an attempt to do that. If it doesn't work, I would think anyone who is a supporter of this program to be concerned about a situation where this could only be used for rental projects. Generally, I think Vermont policymakers have wanted to promote and support for sale development, for sale. A lot of us believe in homeownership and the virtues of homeownership. And I think the intent of this was for this to be a tool that could support new for sale homes as well as rental units. It is possible that to meet that intent, there might need to be more legislative engagement of one sort or another. But
I'd like to offer something. So you and I think the other witnesses who have testified about this perceived possible problem are all very experienced with the legislative process.
Yep.
And I imagine or aware that when you try to make a perceived small tweak to a program, it's a valuable opportunity for everyone else to relitigate the entire thing. This passed, I think, by the skin of its teeth, and everyone knows that. And I wonder if maybe we just want to let it sit for a bit while we.
I hear you, and I understand that and agree with that fully. And I'll only raise it here because it could become an existential thing. If you want this to be used for sale, it may not be possible to do it at the rulemaking and guideline line. And I just don't want that to be a surprise. Absolutely. In some sense of after all of this positive talk about the process and the work so far, but agree completely.
And if one person brought it up, yes, if one person brought it up, I would have thought, oh, a warning, and now everyone's brought it up. So I'm just putting that on the table. Thank you.
Just wanted to be transparent and straightforward about it.
Yeah.
You developed properties before?
I did in an old life. I have not been a developer myself for,
Primary residences with homeowners associations and covenants. And I mean, this is not hard. I don't understand, and maybe this isn't the right place for this, but it is not hard for a developer starting from the beginning to put covenants in place to make something primary residences. That seems to be difficult for people to understand, and I'm not sure why. So I'm not sure why this is turned into something that it.
I appreciate the question, and I don't think anyone's suggesting that it is legally impossible to put some kind of deed restriction or covenant in place. The challenge, and we have been convening groups of attorneys and bankers and builders to look at this, is what would the kind of provision that that is being contemplated here that would be necessary for that would be an unusual provision to have in a for sale deed. And there are financing questions about what that would do to the marketability of that home and those deeds, those mortgages, which, as you know, the way our lending industry works, almost all for sale mortgages are traded there's not just the original transaction, there's secondary markets. And I think there are some I will say the bankers that, and lawyers that we have talked to, do not think this is a trivial issue, but I hope you were right. And there is a way through this that, is straightforward, and to be continued.
I think that we have a working document now with the guidelines that we have. But it's not a final document. I think it's a living document that's going to continue to merge as, things are going to get added, things will get deleted as we move along this process. But I think we need to really get this process going and find out where the tough points are in it. And then we work to make it work. So if it comes up that this is a big issue, then we'll have to figure out a way around it. But I think. Jim?
I had some preliminary conversations this morning in the cafeteria around this subject, but I think he's right on point. I've been involved with affordability the covenants of Habitat for Humanity for a number of years. And these issues come up. But to paraphrase what I think Harry was, see where he's going is, let's not try to solve a problem we don't have yet. We're early in the process here, and we're gonna way through it sensibly without, I think as Chair Kornheiser was saying, trying to pull things apart premature.
I would like nothing more than never to have to talk to you about this again.
We all feel the same way.
If things don't start out that way, I don't want it to be a surprise if then it does need to be further conversation to make this the tool that I think a lot of you voted for. But let's hope this will be worked out. Agreed, the program's about to open. There's a path that's been offered to resolve this through the municipal agreements and the compliance process, and let's hope that works.
Other questions before we go? Thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.